The Texas sun beat down on Redemption Creek like a merciless judge, turning the main street into a corridor of shimmering heat. Dust devils spun lazily between the weathered storefronts, and the air smelled of horse manure, whiskey, and the fading dreams of frontier folk. It was late afternoon, that dead time between lunch and supper when even the saloons seemed to be holding their breath. Colonel Marcus Wade rode down that street like he owned every brick, every post, every grain of dust beneath his stallion's hooves. Perhaps he did. At 56, with silver threading through his dark hair and a fortune built on cattle ranches and mining claims, Marcus Wade commanded respect the way a general commands armies. His tailored black coat, imported from back east, marked him as a man of means in a territory where most wore burlap and sweat. His son, Thomas, rode beside him, a young man of 23 who bore his father's sharp features but not yet his hardness. The boy had inherited his mother's eyes, soft and prone to seeing the good in people, a quality Marcus had spent years trying to beat out of him. "Father, we have the deed to the northern ridge," Thomas said, his voice carrying the excitement of a young man who still believed accumulation meant something. "By next spring, we'll have the finest spread in 3 counties." Marcus nodded absently, his gaze fixed ahead. He'd built an empire from nothing, or rather, from the ruins of other men's dreams. That's what the frontier rewarded: ruthlessness, ambition, the willingness to take what the weak couldn't hold. They were halfway down Main Street when the smell hit them, a sour, unwashed reek of human desperation. Huddled against the wall of the general store, wrapped in rags that had once been clothing, sat a woman. Her gray-streaked hair hung in matted tangles. Her face was so weathered by sun and suffering that her actual age was impossible to determine. Her hands, extended in a beggar's plea, trembled with palsy or starvation or both. "Spare a coin," she whispered, her voice like wind through dead branches. "Just a coin for food. I haven't eaten since yesterday." Marcus Wade looked directly through her, the way a man looks through a window at something on the other side. His horse didn't break stride. Thomas started to reach for his saddlebag, but his father's sharp voice cut him off. "Don't encourage them, boy. Weakness begets more weakness. She's probably just lazy, looking for an easy way instead of honest work." The woman's hand fell away. Thomas turned in his saddle to watch her receding, a discomfort etched into his young face, but he said nothing. A son learns early which battles he cannot win. They rode on, toward the finest restaurant in town, where a special table awaited the richest man in the county. The next morning, Marcus woke in his sprawling mansion on the hill overlooking Redemption Creek. The walls were lined with mahogany, the furniture imported from San Francisco, the chandeliers glittering like captured stars. Everything was exactly as it should be, everything except the hollow feeling that had taken residence in his chest somewhere around the time he turned 40. He dressed in his finest, a custom suit that cost more than most men earned in a year, and prepared for a day of business. Land deals, cattle transactions, the endless machinery of accumulation. Thomas was supposed to meet him at the office, but the boy was late. Typical of youth, Marcus thought with irritation. No discipline. No understanding of how precious time truly was. When Thomas finally appeared, his shirt was dusty, his face flushed with either exertion or emotion, possibly both. "Where have you been?" Marcus demanded, not looking up from his ledgers. "Father, I need to talk to you about something important." Thomas's voice had that tremulous quality that meant he was about to say something foolish. "The woman we saw yesterday on Main Street." "I don't want to hear about beggars, Thomas. They're beneath our concern. Father, please. Just listen." Thomas took a breath, and in that moment, he looked older, more resolved. "I couldn't stop thinking about her. This morning, I went back with some food and blankets. I talked to her for an hour." Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "You did what? Good God, boy, what were you thinking? You can't go around encouraging every vagrant." "Her name is Catherine," Thomas interrupted, and the way he said it, with a kind of reverent wonder, made Marcus look up sharply. "Father, she used to be educated. She speaks proper English when she's not half-starved and delirious. She mentioned places she'd been, people she knew. She asked me my name, and when I told her I was Thomas Wade, she went very still." Something cold moved through Marcus's chest, a sensation like stepping barefoot into winter water. She said she once knew a man named Marcus Wade. 25 years ago, in San Antonio. The ledgers on Marcus's desk suddenly seemed very far away. He found himself standing, though he had no memory of deciding to do so. She's confused, Thomas. Senile from years on the streets. She remembered your mother's name, Thomas continued quietly. She remembered that you had a scar on your left shoulder blade from a fall off a horse when you were 16. She remembered that you loved her. The office began to spin slowly, like a carousel of memories that Marcus had spent a quarter-century trying to suppress. How did she know those things? Thomas pressed. How could a random beggar woman know things about your past unless she was actually there? Unless she was actually... He stopped, understanding beginning to dawn in his young face. She was, wasn't she? She was the woman. The one you never talk about. The one Mother always got angry about when she drank too much. Marcus sank back into his chair. Through the window of his office, he could see the town spread below him, the town he'd conquered, the fortune he'd built, the life he'd constructed with such meticulous precision. And somewhere down there, in the shadows between buildings, sat the ghost of the man he used to be. Her name was Catherine Summers, he heard himself say. His voice sounded strange, as though it belonged to someone else, someone from very long ago. I was a poor ranch hand. She was the daughter of a merchant. We met at a dance. I was nothing, Thomas. I had nothing. Then what happened? Thomas asked softly. Her father forbade it. Said I wasn't fit to court his daughter. That I'd never amount to anything. I made a choice. Marcus looked at his hands, at the rings that glittered on his fingers, at the symbols of his triumph. I chose to prove I was worth something. I chose ambition over love. I came here, made my fortune, and by the time I had enough to offer her a decent life, I'd learned to live without her. Or I thought I had. He paused, and his next words came out barely above a whisper. She wrote to me. 3 years after we parted. She said she was expecting a child. My child. She said she was leaving to start over somewhere new, somewhere she could raise him without shame. She asked me one more time to come with her, to choose her and the child over my need to build an empire. Thomas's face had gone white. I didn't go, Marcus continued. I was nearly engaged to Catherine Harmon by then, your mother. I had prospects, position, everything within reach. I sent Catherine Summers money, enough to help her start over. I never heard from her again. I told myself she'd found happiness, that she'd married someone else, that my son had grown up never knowing his father's name. It's me, Thomas whispered. Oh God, Father, I'm that child, aren't I? No, Marcus said, but the word carried no conviction. Your mother, Catherine Harmon, she raised you. She was your... She hated me, Thomas said, and his voice cracked. She was cold to me my entire life. She called me weak when I showed kindness. She said I had unsuitable traits. Now I understand. Every time she looked at me, she saw you with her, with Catherine Summers. Marcus stood and walked to the window, staring out at the landscape he'd conquered. And down on Main Street, he knew without being told, was the woman he'd loved and abandoned. The woman who'd borne his child and raised him alone, and who had somehow, by the cruel mathematics of fate, ended up begging on the streets of the very town where her former lover had become king. Come with me, Marcus said, and his voice held none of the certainty it had carried just hours before. Come with me right now. They found her where Thomas had left her, still huddled against the store wall. In the afternoon light, Marcus could see past the ravages of poverty and hardship. He could see, buried beneath the lines and the rags, the face he'd memorized 25 years ago. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Catherine, Marcus said, and he knelt in the dust beside her, not caring that his expensive suit was being destroyed. Catherine, wake up. Please wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, confused at first, then gradually focusing on his face. He watched recognition dawn, watched the shock, watched tears begin to stream down her weathered cheeks. Marcus, she breathed. Oh God, Marcus. Is that you? I thought I was dreaming again. I dream about you so often. I'm here, he said, and he took her papery hands in his. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. For everything. For leaving you. For not being brave enough. For letting pride matter more than love." Thomas stood silently, tears streaming down his face as he watched his father embrace the woman who'd borne him, the woman whose sacrifice and strength had shaped him more profoundly than any fortune ever could. "Our son," Marcus said, pulling back to look at Catherine's face. "He's a good man. He's kind and honest, and I can see you in him. In his eyes, in his compassion. You made him magnificent, despite me. Despite everything." Catherine looked at Thomas, and a lifetime of longing, of pride carried in secret, of a mother's private joy in her son's goodness, flooded across her face. "Thomas," she whispered, saying his name as though it was the most precious word in the world. "My boy. My beautiful boy." Thomas knelt beside his father, and he took his mother's hand. For a long moment, the three of them knelt together in the dust of Main Street, a family fractured by ambition finally finding its way home. The weeks that followed brought a transformation to Redemption Creek. Marcus Wade, the ruthless magnate, became a changed man, not through sudden revelation, but through the daily practice of choosing love over pride. He brought Catherine to the mansion. He hired the finest doctors from back east to tend to her health. He spent his evenings listening to her stories, making up for lost time with the desperate urgency of a man who understood, too late, that time was the only thing that truly mattered. Thomas watched his father relearn how to be human, how to apologize, how to listen, how to sit quietly with another person and simply be present. One evening, as the sun set fire to the western sky and painted the landscape in shades of amber and rose, Marcus sat on the porch with Catherine. His hand held hers with the gentleness of a man handling something infinitely precious. "I built all of this," he said, gesturing to the mansion, the lands beyond, the town he'd conquered below them, thinking it would make me matter. Thinking if I had enough power, enough money, enough proof of my worth, I could finally be content. But I was wrong, Catherine. I was so very wrong. Catherine smiled, and in that smile was the echo of the girl he'd loved, but deepened, ennobled by suffering, made sacred by sacrifice. "We had a child together," she said softly. "A son who carries your strength but chose a better path. That's what you built, Marcus. Not this house. Not this fortune. You built Thomas, even in your absence, because I loved you, and I wanted him to know he came from love." Marcus pulled her close, and they sat together as darkness fell gently over the frontier, watching stars emerge in the infinite sky. He'd spent 25 years chasing something he thought would fill the emptiness in his chest. It took losing everything to understand that the only thing worth building was a life shared with those we love. And sometimes, if you're blessed enough, if you're humble enough, if you're brave enough to face the consequences of your choices, you get a second chance to build it right. On Main Street below, the town of Redemption Creek carried its name well. For in that humble place, where a rich man had once passed a beggar without seeing, a family was finally redeemed, not by gold, but by grace.